Hello Thrashers, and welcome back to the Mosh Pit Reviews, where yours truly, Thrash Maniac 99, reviews metal albums in the calendar year of 2019, and, well, I talked about how Slipknot was maybe the biggest album to come out this year, even same for Killswitch Engage, but forget all that. We have reached the pinnacle of all albums this year in terms of hype and the long wait for it. Tool has a new album out finally after 13 years. Since 10,000 Days came out, we finally get the new Tool album that everyone has been crying and clamoring for. Well, most people at least have been clamoring for a long, long time. It was originally supposed to have been done in 2013, and then some other stuff happened, such as lawsuits, creative difference, doing more shows, blah blah blah, and it's been kind of a feeding into itself cycle over the course of the last 6-7 years from the time when we were supposed to have gotten a new album, which would have been earlier in the decade. But what can you do when it came to lawsuits and that kind of stuff? And plus, maybe people were thinking maybe the reason it's taken so long is because they're taking the time to make sure the material is down pat and perfect. Well, was that the case? I highly doubt it. After all, they said that the album was recorded between March of last year till January this year. So they definitely still did spend 10 months in the studio working on this album, and working with the same producer who actually produced the last Avenged Sevenfold album, The Stage, which was a prog metal epic for Avenged Sevenfold standards. So, Fear Inoculum is the title of the new Tool album, the first one in 13 long-ass years. And there was no breakup or anything, it was just a bunch of random stuff coming together, such as lawsuits, creative difference, really, you name it, it's what happened when it came to Tool, and why it took so long for the new album to finally drop. Well, it dropped today, and prior to the album coming out, they've decided to put all their material on digital, on iTunes, Spotify for the first time ever, and this got people thinking, what in the world's going on here? Because they were a band that was not all about digital streaming, stuff like that. They wanted people to buy the actual product. Now, me speaking, I have 3 of the 5 Tool albums. The only ones I'm missing, apart from this one, is Undertow, the first album, which has sort of been an album that I never got into, at least I haven't dug into as deeply. But beside the point, I really liked Lateralis. I thought that was I still think that's the best Tool album. 10,000 Days and Anima are up there as well. But with Fear Inoculum, let's discuss. So the first single they released off the album was the opening title track, Fear Inoculum. Now, listening to this album was also the first time I heard the single. I never listened to the single prior to the album coming out, so listening to the title track was my first experience of it while listening to the whole album from top to bottom. Now, as far as which version I listened to, I have it on Spotify, but I wanted to listen to the standard edition, the 7 tracks, Fear Inoculum, Pneuma, Invincible, Descending, Calling Voices, Chocolate Chip Trip, and Tempest with a 7 instead of a T. To me, the songs like Litany Contre la Pure, butchered my French, as well as Legion, Inoculant, and Mockingbeat are basically just bridging songs to bridge the gap from one song to another. That's pretty much what they were all about. But the main 7 songs, so starting with the title track, Fear Inoculum, to me, this was, in my opinion, a song that would be down on the list of from best to worst in terms of the songs, because to me, not a bad song. In fact, it's a pretty decent song, but I think the problem that it suffered was the fact that it just felt like it kind of dragged on a little bit because they just kept repeating the same idea, the same tropes, the same riff, the same beats, the same patterns. and it just kind of felt like it was a repetitive conveyor belt producing this song. That's just my opinion, but nonetheless, it wasn't terrible. It was a decent enough song to be passable. There's really no bad song on the album, if you ask me, but this was definitely one of the weakest songs, if not maybe the weakest song on the album. I even said it on Twitter this morning when I was first listening to the album that the song definitely wasn't that great. But then you get to the second track, Numa, where it definitely picked up in terms of the songwriting, the heaviness, and the tropes. It really diversified the music a little bit with this track. And same even goes for the song Invincible. Now, Numa, as far as sonically, it definitely would fit in that realm of Lateralis or 10,000 Days, give or take. Probably more in tune with 10,000 Days. It sounded like a song that could have fit perfectly with the 10,000 Days cycle. With Invincible, however, it's kind of that middle ground between, say, Undertow and Anima. It definitely has a little bit more of that alternative flavoring that Tool has always sort of incorporated into their progressive metal sound, by incorporating a little bit of that like alternative aesthetic and some of the alternative metal ideas from bands such as Helmet and Faith No More, even Melvins, even though they're more a sludge metal band, but you get the idea. Descending, which was the second longest song of the album, definitely fits into that realm in Lateralis, where it definitely has that mystery to it. It has a lot of... I don't think avant-garde would be the proper term to use, but just experimental, where they're experimenting with different melodies, different time signatures. But then again, that's sort of been the standard in Tool's sound. Calling Voices is definitely a song that would fit in perfectly on Anima for absolutely sure, because you get that first half where it's really kind of like the building blocks to the second half, where the heaviness picks up and the beats start getting more rhythmical, whereas, like I said, the first half was more build-up based and atmospheric. Now, Chocolate Chip Trip, which was under 5 minutes, the shortest song of the standard edition, which was basically just a bridging song between Calling Voices and Tempest, where it's just like the first half, it's just nothing but electronic noise, but then it's mostly a drum solo song, and Danny Carey definitely showing that he is definitely one of the best and most experimental drummers in heavy metal history. But then you get to the song Tempest, the final song of the album, at nearly 16 minutes. And wow, it is a doozy. Probably one of the heaviest songs Tool has ever written, and one of the best songs I think Tool has ever written. It just has such a... It has a little bit of melancholy, a little bit of mystery, and a lot of darkness behind it. And it's funny how they used the number 7 to replace the first T in the title, Tempest. Then again, it's like the number 7 was basically a theme throughout the album, with certain time signatures, maybe even phrasings, like in the syllables, at times using 7 syllables. A haiku, almost. So it's like, you could really call this the number 7 album, even though it's album number 5 from Tool, because they were just obsessed with the number 7 on this album. Then again, people would like to get lucky at casinos with a number 7 now, would they? But yeah, Tempest, I had a fear that because it was the longest song of the album at nearly 16 minutes, I thought it was going to follow a similar trope to the title track, but thankfully it didn't. They were changing it up left, right, and center as far as riffs, the bass rhythms, the drums, even vocal patterns. Maynard James Keenan definitely showing that his voice has definitely aged a little bit since 10,000 Days came out, but he's still got a great voice to him that is hard to deny, whether it be in the high notes or in that mid to low range that he likes to do at times. But also throughout the album, you get some memorable riffs from Adam Jones, some great bass playing from Justin Chandler. The musicianship was on par on this album, or not on par with this album, but I would say the musicianship was on par with albums such as 10,000 Days and Lateralis. And to me, this album sort of combined everything Tool was all about from the past, going even back to Undertow, up to 10,000 Days, and try and build off of that and reestablish where they are in the current day and age of heavy metal in 2019. Now, I know a lot of people are probably going to shit on the album primarily because it took so long and they think that's going to be another Chinese democracy situation. Hell, I even brought that up on Twitter, having a fear of, is this album going to be a mind blower, or is it going to be like Guns N' Roses all over again, where it took so long, but yet what we got was crap? Well, I would definitely say the former. Definitely not a bad album at all. Definitely, it's not a Chinese democracy situation. In fact, this is going to go down as a top 10 contender for Album of the Year. This, apart from the title track and Chocolate Chip Trip being slightly weaker, everything else on this album is absolutely incredible. Even though I'm not the biggest Tool fan in the world, I do have 3 albums of theirs that are great. But when it comes to my progressive metal, I prefer bands that have more straightforward rhythms with a little bit of a time signature differential sensibility, but not all the time. That's why I love the band Opeth so much. And to me, Opeth has, in my opinion, always been better than Tool. That's just me. As a prog metal fan, I prefer Opeth way more over Tool. But Tool is definitely an essential band for sure. Competent, never released a bad album. This was not a bad album by any means. In fact, if I'm going to give it a score, this might be controversial, but I'm going to give this a 38 out of 40. Not a perfect album by any means. Like I said, the title track definitely had its problems. Chocolate Chip Trip being more of a drum solo track, which I understand showcasing your ability, but to me, should have been on the digital version and just left the 6 songs that were 10 minutes or longer as it was. And another complaint I know some people are going to have is the fact that the songs maybe are a bit too long for them, but then again, long songs is a standard in progressive metal. You're gonna have to expect it some way, shape, or form. Now, the reason why I give this a 38 out of 40 primarily is because I feel this is going to grow on people. I feel like this album is going to be a grower for people. They may not care for it too much at first, but the more they listen to it, they're going to get into it and think it's probably one of the best of the year. Just like me, even though I gave this one listen and I was thoroughly impressed, and I plan on listening to it more and more as the year goes on. Same with albums like Swallow the Sun's new album, Rammstein, among others. So this is definitely going to be an Album of the Year contender. Not quite Album of the Year material for me. In fact, we may have some of those coming out later in the year, like Borknagar, Opeth, Mayhem, Cattle Decapitation, Nile maybe, even Napalm Death possibly. Onslaught. There's so many other albums coming out this year that could eclipse Tool. But for me, 38 out of 40, it's a great album, and I know it's gonna produce quite a bit of debate in the comments or in articles that people may love it or hate it. Tool's always just been a band that's never had a united group of people to accept them. They've always been disagreed upon by a lot of people. As far as if they're metal, if you ask me, yes, they are a progressive metal band with alternative influence. So that's all I gotta say on that. Geez, this was a long review because, well, there was a lot to talk about with this album, and I know my good pal Brofist is gonna be happy with this, and I know he's a big Tool fan. But anyways, what did you guys, watching this review, what did you guys think of Fear Inoculum? Let me know in the comments section below. As far as what I'm going to review next week, well, I'm actually going to leave that up to you guys. Right after this review is posted, I'm going to put up a poll because the 3 albums, or actually 4 albums that are coming out next week. We got K.O. Dot, and Sonata Arctica, Disillusion, and Suicidal Angels. I want to know from you guys which one of those 4 you want me to review next weekend. But until next time, kudos to Tool, and I will see you guys very soon. Peace out, and have a good night. Well, it was Dorian Facepuncher who led the first lap of the day, as he's got his teammate Dylan Young right behind him, as they're both out of Young Motorsports working together for the time being. And then I see two Gibbs cars working together. Although I think I just saw, oh my goodness, a massive crash! This is the huge one at Talladega. That's about half the field in a car flipping wildly. That's Anthony McCrory. Holy cow.